Everyone thinks, as I say quite often, that some big epiphany is going to come along and bam, all of a sudden you're a trader. Well, it's really a million little things. And one thing I was thinking about right before I went live is the longer you trade, the more it's like a million and one little things. It's like the more and more little things you begin to discover or unearth, or however you want to look at it. And this is actually a good thing, okay? I'm not a big golfer, but when somebody tries to teach me how to play, it's like you got to do this with your grip, you got to do this with your feet, you got to do this and this, and your arm has to do this and all this other stuff. And instead, if they would just say, okay, you need to do this one little thing, let's just work on keeping your right arm straight, and then work through all these other things. Years ago, I had a bunch of people try to teach me guitar because I want to learn. I could play guitar years ago, and they would grab my hand and mash into a chord and try to get me to strum, and with no luck whatsoever. And then one time I was at a buddy of mine's house. We're getting ready to go out or whatever, and he had to get cleaned up. And I'm like, oh man, I want to learn how to play guitar. And he says, so he did the same thing. He mashed my hand into a chord, C chord, A chord, whatever. And I'm like, ah. He goes, okay, well, let's try something different. And he goes, I want you to just hit the string like this, and then I just want you to close one thread or whatever you call it, this one thread. And he goes, I want you to just do that. He goes, I'm gonna go grab a shower and get ready to go out. But the whole time I'm in there, that's all I want you to do, and then he's like, okay, then we added a finger, and before you knew it, before we actually left the house, I was actually playing like a little mariachi type of song, and I was blown away, like, wow, this could actually work. And trading is the same way. It's a billion little things. But anyway, number 160,863. You want to build your case, and more importantly, be ready to defend it. Now, this morning I was thinking about the turtles, and the turtles were crazy successful. And the long story endless there is Richard, Dennis, and Eckhart Bill Eckhart, I think, decided to, they had a bet on whether or not you can grow traders like they grew the turtles in at a turtle farm in Singapore. And one thought they could, and one thought they couldn't. Nurture versus nature, I suppose, was their argument. So they bet $1 or whatever. And then they ended up putting together a team. And for the most part, these traders knocked it out of the park. And I think there's two things that happened there. One, because after the program, most of them did not do too well. I think there's only one or two. There's a few notable exceptions that did extremely well afterwards, but most of them blew up afterwards. And I don't want to be schadenfreude or anything. It happens, right? But I think they were in the right place at the right time. And as important, they were held accountable, or even more important. Okay, yeah, you had Eckhart and Dennis's help as mentors or so to speak. But according to Curtis Faith, they really weren't like hanging around being mentors or anything. But what they did do was they held them accountable. And not so much accountable like, did you make money, lose money, but more so, did you follow the process? Did you follow the system? Can you justify, okay, doing what you did? And one of the examples that Curtis Faith, in his book is, I think it's The Way of the Turtle. I haven't read the turtle books that are written by people trying to capitalize off of their success. I don't know. I just think that's kind of wrong, but not wrong, but just not as kosher, or so to speak, as someone who actually lived it and was there. And that's why I like Curtis Faith's book. Plus, he's but anyway, Curtis Faith talked about one guy didn't take a crude trade. Everybody got creamed on crude. It did a fake out or whatever. And the entire team of turtles got creamed except for this one guy. So they didn't call in the whole team and like, why'd you guys lose money? They lost money because they followed the system. They called this one guy in and kind of raked him over the coals a little bit because he didn't follow the process. And he gave him a bit of a justification. He says, well, usually if my analysis goes this long or this far, I have found that it's not worth taking a trade, or whatever the case may be. And they kind of halfway bought it. But anyway, you want to build your case, hold yourself accountable. And if your trade fails miserably, especially, you want to be able to defend your case. And as I say nearly every week, how many times have you taken a trade and then you get stopped out, and then the second after you're stopped out, you go, I knew I shouldn't have taken that trade. And you honestly feel that way. So it's like, so you knew going in that you were dealing with mediocrity. So be prepared to defend it. Another anecdote that I'll often talk about is I have a client does exceptionally well, and the wheels come off the bus, like the rest of us, right? But I said, look, what if you told your wife you're going to follow this Dave Landry guy? He's off the wrong a lot. He loses money a lot. You might go 6 to 8 months without making a lot of money, but overall, we're going to do okay. Every now and then we'll knock it out of the park. No guarantees in that, but so far so good, right? And that way, if you're not following the system and she asks you about a loss, you can just say, oh, well, I took that one on my own or whatever. Anyway, he said, oh, no, that one didn't marriage. So he knows he's doing the wrong thing, but he's doing it anyway. And you know what? I'm not holier than thou. I make a lot of mistakes. I do a lot of stupid things, and that's where the million little things comes in. Anyway, so build your case. Is it a persistent trend? Does it tend to go up day after day after day after day? Does the stock trade cleanly and not look like an electrocardiogram? Is the trend also accelerating? Are there trend qualifiers? And is there lots of Landry light? Landry light would be a trend qualifier. Gaps and laps in the direction of the trend, wide range bars in the direction of the trend. Just little things that leave clues, little things in the charts, but little clues in the chart as to whether or not the stock is trending. Again, does it trade cleanly? And by especially lately, I mean like in more recent times. Like every now and then you'll see me recommend a stock that was kind of wide and loose in the past. Well, maybe the volume was thinner then, or whatever the case may be. But in more recent times, you know, maybe I don't want to confuse the issue with facts, but maybe the technology has come to fruition and it's more viable now, and so the stock is trending and trading cleanly and worthwhile. Now, ideally, you want a stock that trades cleanly forever, but every now and then you have to go with one that's just trading cleanly at the present time. But especially at the present time, along those lines, you don't want any gaps against the trend unless it's a commodity related stock. So like if you go back and look at that, I don't know if it was TFPM or KGC, one of those two gold stocks had a gap in the middle of its setup. Well, I'm sure if you looked at gold, they had a big gap down that day too. So I'm not so worried about that, but in an individual setup, a gap could be a harbinger, a gap down, right? Could be a harbinger of things to come because somebody wanted to get out and fast. Little things, I mean, obviously there's not enough time to go through all of them, so I just want to kind of scratch the surface here at least, but this is a good start. If you did all these things, you'd have a pretty good chance of doing fairly well, right? No significant overhead resistance. And by the way, this build your case kind of dovetails into accountability, okay? So I'm kind of accountable because I'm recommending this stock to my people. I'm taking the stock personally, okay? So that's a lot of pressure on from two sides, right? When I lose money on a stock, like I'm losing money today on some, it's like, oh, geez, I'm losing and other people losing too. So I want to make damn sure that I could justify after all is said and done, and you know the hate mail start coming in because we lost, you know, failed miserably on a setup. I can just say, well, it really looked good at the time. Sometimes shit happens again. Getting back to this, you definitely want to make sure the sector is also trending. As I said earlier, you want the market, the sector, and the stock all to be headed in the right direction. Ideally, sometimes you get the meatloaf trade, which 2 out of 3 ain't bad, okay? But on top of that, it's really great, and this doesn't happen very often, but it's really great when you have a setup and the market set up and the stocks are set up. Now, getting back to the sector for a second, you want to make sure, ideally, other stocks within the sector are set up and there's some sexy sisters or brothers, whatever you're into, and if you're into both, you're a greedy bastard, but that's another story altogether. You want to definitely make sure that there's some sexy sisters again or brothers set up, and ideally you're looking at your setup that you really, really like, but then there's 2 or 3 more that you really like too, and you have a hard time deciding which one is the best. Well, usually when that's the case, your setup is going to work, whatever one you choose. Now, you want to make sure you have enough of a knockout move, and that can seem a little arbitrary. That's where the 30 EMA, if you're newer to trading, and that's why I come up with patterns like Landry pullback. So somebody who needs something that's slightly more mechanical, slightly easier to recognize, slightly easier to scan for, those type of patterns. That's why the 30 EMA is a pretty good place to look for depth of pullback. I tend to eyeball it, as I often say. Most of my charting is done with blank charts. Now, if you're trading a transitional pattern, it needs to be an obvious transition, okay? You need to have like a bow tie or something off of serious lows or serious highs. Now, getting back to the, almost said its name, oops, the mystery chart for this week, you can see all those things I just talked about. Well, you don't know the sector, but all those things I'm talking about are doing really well with this one particular mystery chart. And I think it's a biotech. Yeah, it's a biotech. And as you saw earlier with the Landry 100, that's the biggest piece of the pie, tied with gold right now as far as the hottest stocks, even though the biotech sector is a little bit questionable. It's okay shorter term, but longer term does have some issues. Anyway, any questions at all, that?